Fulgrim is attacking the Ultramarines. This is a brand new story that featured inside of the brand new Emperor's Children Codex, and today we're going to break it down, we're going to talk about it, and potentially theorize what this means now for the future of Fulgrim's return, and where he is going to launch his next attacks against the Imperium, or maybe other Xenos races. So let's jump in and let's get waffling. So the story opens up with Fulgrim literally pouring some essence of the warp into a captured Ultramarine librarian. This causes a librarian to spasm. He more or less explodes, and the colors and the visual representation that you would link with Slaanesh is everywhere, and this is all part of Fulgrim's performance. He's performing this for a Slaaneshi audience, but then he's soonly brought back to the battlefield raging around him because the Ultramarines are taking on the Emperor's Children. So with his gaze brought back to the battlefield, he sees like this vulgar fortress in the background. He sees his sons fighting the Ultramarines, and he makes note of the actual Ultramarines armor, which I think is a slight dig to how the community sometimes feels about the Ultramarines, because he states the Ultramarines whose blue armor was as bland as their souls. You know, Fulgrim is not entertained by Ultramarines. He finds them boring. Maybe some of the community finds it boring. Maybe it's kind of a little jab towards the Ultramarine players who, you know, are just Codex is simps, and all they want to do is sit down and read a book in a library. With him basically on the battlefield, like the Emperor's Children see this and they're all cheering. It literally drives ecstasy in them. Fulgrim actually notes it may even drive ecstasy inside the Ultramarines, even though they don't admit it, to look upon his glorious form. But maybe this is just Fulgrim being Fulgrim. Anyway, the Ultramarines seeing Fulgrim actually on the battlefield start directing their fire towards him. This is a prime threat now. Fulgrim gets satisfaction from this, like being the center of attention, as we expect Fulgrim to be. He actually spots what he thinks is one of the main officers, a chap with like Vox antennas on him and stuff like that, and he puts his wings in the air and he like literally glides over to him and he points his sword at him and offers a duel, saying, "You and me, let's go right now." As he's making his way to the officer, he's like engaging other Ultramarines, beheading them, literally just ripping the battlefield apart in front of him. And then he actually gets into a fight with this officer, and it's just a performance. It's all bait. He like holds one of his swords in the air and he's like dueling with his other sword, just lowering in him, just playing with this Ultramarine officer. And when he makes a mistake, then he goes in and he literally just destroys him. And Fulgrim, of course, smirking, smiling, as he always does. He's just playing with the food that is in front of him. Now, with the Ultramarine officer being brought down, we're left with this little paragraph, which may open up maybe a narrative of the Ultramarines going forward, fighting Fulgrim. And it states, "The warriors succumbed immediately to the blades of the warp toxins. Fulgrim flickered the spasming corpse away, already bored." That was a line officer. "He heard his sons racing with eagerness into the shocked Ultramarine survivors. Fulgrim opened up his senses, needing to feel something more. There were more of Guilliman's sons to kill. Maybe he would stay and take his time over them." And that is basically the story inside of the Emperor's Children Codex. I've read the Emperor's Children Codex now, and I have to admit, there's not really a lot of new lore. That was one of the main things that stood out to me, was that story of Fulgrim fighting the Ultramarines. Now, what I want to say from this now is that if Fulgrim is going to be carrying on and fighting the Ultramarines, it's probably already been done by this point, that the Ultramarines are going to report back to Guilliman, that Fulgrim has been sighted, the Emperor's Children have been sighted, the fighting on this planet, we need assistance. Is potentially the next narrative now going to reach Guilliman's ear, that Fulgrim, his brother, has returned and he's causing destruction and devastation? Don't forget, Fulgrim is the reason why Guilliman got put into stasis. You can argue Fulgrim is the reason why the Imperium fell into so much decay and backward steps, because it didn't have a figure to lead it from the top, because that figure was put into stasis by Fulgrim. So potentially, again, hopefully, fingers crossed, we actually start to see some more narrative now looking at Fulgrim's return and how Guilliman is going to react to that. Also, don't forget, we do have that Fulgrim novel that has not been released yet. maybe that is going to cover more story on Fulgrim's return and who he's fighting against. Maybe other Space Marine chapters, maybe it will feature the Ultramarines, etc. We know the Iron Hands hate the Emperor's Children and Fulgrim. We know the Ultramarines hate the Emperor's Children and Fulgrim. It actually mentions it in the Fulgrim page inside the Codex that the hatred of the Iron Hands and the Ultramarines is unmatched against Fulgrim, right? They literally hate this being. So hopefully we get to see some of that narrative mix up again in a future story. I also think another story narrative they can also visit with this is Slaanesh, the Emperor's Children, Fulgrim, along with the Eldar. We know the Eldar just got a bunch of brand new models. I personally would like to see a narrative involving that. Slaanesh, the Eldar souls, that is a big, big thing in Warhammer 40,000. And sometimes it's just really left to the side of the road because it's, you know, Chaos Space Marines versus the Imperium and Loyalist Marines and stuff like that. But I'd like to see the Eldar get more focused and more involved in this now. With Fulgrim coming back, and again, apparently he is wielding one of the Kron swords. That could be a massive, massive, massive thing for the Eldar getting involved in the narrative and trying to retrieve that sword. That could be a big thing for them. Of course, I don't think they're ever going to retrieve it because that would be, you know, a big, big thing for the Eldar, but it'd be nice to set up some narratives, some storylines, Eldred and stuff getting involved to really try and put a thorn inside Fulgrim's side. And basically, that's all we've got to talk about today. I know a lot of people keep asking me about the actual lore inside of the Codex itself. There is some articles in there that have written about like the new units and stuff and everything, which is kind of cool. But in terms of like showing off new Emperor's Children warbands with lore behind them and everything like that, we're just not getting that anymore. Like blurbs of text, like brand new battle zones and stuff where we could visit and, you know, maybe have stories around. There's none of that inside of this Codex. For like a lore type of review of this Codex, I would probably give it a strong 5 out of 10. And, you know, maybe I'm being a bit too generous with that. I really do feel like the quality of 40k Codexes in terms of lore has really fallen below, especially when you compare it to some of the 8th edition and even 9th edition Codexes that we got for Warhammer 40,000. But I want to talk about that in an actual video on its own because there's so many things to go into and compare it and just talk about with that subject. But anyway, thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. Sorry, a little bit of a rant at the end. If you've got any thoughts, feedback, anything like that, post it down below and we'll have a nice little chinwag down there as we always do. See you now. Have a great day and bye-bye.